Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast is your one-stop shop for fantasy football news and advice. Can't decide on who to draft on the first round? Going gaga on how to line up your team. Got you covered. Traditional league, dynasty league, PPR league, IDP league, even daily fantasy football league. Join us as we break down all the questions of fantasy football. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast.
Hello there, everybody, and welcome to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network, guys. First of all, I'm your host, Marcus Vargas, as always, and I'm glad to be back. Forgive me for, the slight hiatus. Had a lot of things going on and had to take some time to myself. And I want to thank my bosses here at GSMC for being very, very understanding and allowing me to, take some time for my mental health to sort of recoup, reset. And now we are back, and I'm glad to be here, guys. Happy that I can be talking to you guys again, and that I get to talk about some stuff that I haven't gotten a chance to give my opinion on. So today's show, I'm starting with, everyone's favorite, the most loved team and the most hated team. The Dallas Cowboys, and I want to talk about them more specifically, Dak Prescott and this whole contract situation, because reports came out that he had rejected, a pretty big offer that the Dallas Cowboys were giving him. I think it said, let me see, was it $175 million over 5 years, something like that. And I think he was going to be getting paid $35 million a year, which would have tied him for highest paid quarterback. But he rejected it because he wants a 4-year deal. And I was also, I heard that he was asking for, it was, if he was getting the 5-year deal, he wants the 5th year to be $40+ million for that season. And so I just want to get my thoughts on this, because I'm a guy who's defended Dak Prescott because, the way the market works, the way, these execs usually, they structure these contracts, it's based off of market value, right? So a lot of times teams overpay for guys just because the last guy to get paid was a certain number, and that guy is saying, well, I'm definitely better than him, and yada, 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 so on and so forth. Well, Dak Prescott is out of line here. It was reported that the $35 million a year contract had $106 million in guarantees. And so I just feel like, Dak Prescott is sort of in over his own head. I mean, I understand, why he's doing this, but I just don't see why he believes that he should be the highest paid quarterback in the history of football, even for a second. I don't think he would be the first player ever in football to have over $40 million a year. And we all know that Patrick Mahomes, his contract is going to clock in at probably $40 million a year minimum. That's just the starting line. So I really don't know. I mean, it's hard to, like, in the beginning, I was saying, this is crazy. Give the man his money. Give the man his contract. Like, why isn't this done? Why are you giving all these other guys contracts? And all the linemen have been paid. DeMarcus Lawrence was paid, and they're all underperforming. And this guy's been overperforming his draft position and salary by miles. But it's like, when he's doing this, it's almost impossible to make a deal, right? When he's telling you he wants these sort of out-of-bounds numbers, it's becoming more and more clear and more understandable why the deal hasn't gotten done. I mean, they pretty much, they caved to him with the $35 million a year, $175 million, and it just is, I don't know. And it's $175 million over 5 years. That's a lot of money. I'm pretty sure that would be the highest total salary along with tying the average yearly salary. So it's pretty insane. I don't know why he would reject it. And I understand, the thinking right now is that, in 5 years, the salary cap's going to go up. The $35 million a year is going to look silly probably, right? Because, quarterbacks are getting paid more and more. Players are getting paid more and more. So by the time that fifth year rolls around and he has that $45 million mark, that might be the average, right, for the new extensions on quarterbacks. But it's very, very hard, at this point in time to sort of convince, the NFL world and, the Cowboys execs, to give him that sort of money up front 5 years in advance. Who knows? Because, yes, the salary cap is only going to go up and, players are going to be able to be paid more. Dak Prescott could get injured by then. Dak Prescott could horribly fall off. And while, I think teams should have, their utmost loyalty in the guys and faith in them, the Cowboys clearly do not. And that's why, if Patrick Mahomes said, I want that, the Chiefs wouldn't hesitate to get that contract done. You know what I mean? So it's clear here that Dak Prescott is not their guy as much as Pat Mahomes is the guy in Kansas City, and understandably so. I mean, he hasn't done much other than a few don't get me wrong, I respect the playoff appearances, but he hasn't gone and won an NFC Championship game. He hasn't won a Super Bowl, hasn't appeared in a Super Bowl. So, or an NFC Championship game for that matter. And so, I understand he's done a good job. But let's remember, they call it the NFC least for a reason. So those division titles are, they have a little asterisk next to them. But it's just it's a tough situation because while I want to support the guy and I'm all about the players, getting paid, this seems very out of bounds. And it feels like at this point it's only going to result in him holding out. It's at that point where you got to go all or go home, right? Go big or go home, because if he doesn't, then he just looks silly this whole time, right? Causing all this mess, causing all this, bad media, bad press on his regard, and then at the end settling. It's sort of like how Le'Veon Bell held out and said, I'm not playing for this much, and has the tweet that came out, a fan said how, come play with the Jets, and he said you couldn't give me like $60 million a year cash to play with them, and he signs the extension that was smaller than what the Steelers were giving him. It's just, I don't want Dak Prescott to end up in that sort of situation, so I hope that he plans to hold out, and we'll see what happens, because at this point, maybe Jerry caves, gives him the money he wants. I don't think Dak Prescott's worth that kind of money, though. It'll be very, very interesting, and we might see, sort of an ego competition where, Dak Prescott ends up on a different team. I don't think, it's very, very, I understand, the notion that, players are going to be holding out, not playing until they get their money is not very new. But for, when's the last time we saw a quarterback do it, right? And a quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys, you know what I mean? So Tony Romo got his money, right? So Jerry Jones hasn't been dealing with this. And it seems like sort of like not intimidation, but it's just sort of, it feels like there's just so much tension, it's, yes, at the end of the day, yes, they have a salary cap. I understand that. And yes, there's an argument that who cares, whatever, your owners are getting paid so-and-so and they're worth billions of dollars. And I understand, but it feels like this is sort of intimidation factor by Dak Prescott here. Like, I understand that you got soft spots for these guys and they've got soft spots for you, but I want my money, and point blank period. You don't got that, I'm not playing. And it's honestly was sort of unexpected. Because Dak Prescott, he's not the loudest guy. He's not the most outspoken guy. So I wonder how much of this has to do with his agent. But it's only going to get more complex from here, because the more and more information comes out, the more and more I sort of swing to the side of the Dallas Cowboys, because I'm sorry, Dak Prescott, he's not even worth the $35 million a year that they were going to give him. He's certainly not worth more than that as of right now. So it sucks, but it is what it is. I don't know, how good this is going to be for the team. You're coming in with a new coaching staff, new system, new team. If you're not taking part in, virtual OTAs, off-season programs, and when the off-season hopefully officially begins, and hopefully we can have that in person. If you're not doing that, it's just at the quarterback position, it's very, very interesting. Usually teams get these deals done, but this is, of course, an exception to that. However, guys, keep your eyes peeled on this. This is something that definitely is going to be just like how Ezekiel Elliott was last season, and we saw Jerry Jones cave. My prediction, guys, is that Jerry Jones does not cave. They went and got Andy Dalton, and I'm not saying Andy Dalton, is Dak Prescott right now, but Andy Dalton is a very capable quarterback. I think that was, basically an insurance policy, and I don't think that the Joneses are going to cave. I think they're going to stand put. They have already offered him a very, very more than fair contract. He said no, so I think at this point he's not worth the trouble, to be honest. That's just my opinion. Of course, everyone has theirs, but that's my opinion on it, guys. Dak Prescott is not worth more than $35 million a year. Sorry if you don't feel the same, but his play, his wins, the man just got off an 8-8 season, right? So it's not like he has much leverage in his favor. And I understand when you compare him to other players who have gotten paid, but they belong to their own respective franchises. That's something you guys have to remember. Brock Osweiler was got a big contract. Think about that for 2 seconds, right? So, we look at that as a mistake, right? You don't say, oh, well, Brock Osweiler got his, so no, you say Brock Osweiler should have never gotten that contract, right? So when you're comparing, Wentz and Goff to Dak, just remember that, they don't all belong to the Cowboys franchise. So, very, very interesting stuff. But with that, guys, we're going to take our first break. And when we'll get back, we'll talk about more and more hot topics around the league that, I'm just now catching up on. So stay tuned, guys. We'll be right back after the short break.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more.
Alrighty,
it's
guys.
talk the
Welcome
way
back
you
to
want it.
GSMC
This show
Fantasy
eats,
Football
sleeps, and breathes
Podcast.
football. Don't
All right, we
forget to
just got
like
done
them on
talking about
Facebook
Dak
and follow
Prescott
them on
recently
Twitter.
rejecting the
Visit
Cowboys offer.
GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Me, sort of stupidly, but now I want to move on to talk about the recently tabled 4th and 15 alternative for the onside kick. And well, first of all, I just want to give my first thoughts when this was proposed. I actually really enjoyed the idea. Yes, I am definitely biased because I am a fan of an outstanding quarterback, super speed at wide receiver, an amazing tight end, and a new toy in the backfield who's great at pass catching. And I know that we could convert a ton of 4th and 15s, but I do understand that the reluctance with this rule because 4th and 15s are so much easier to convert than an onside kick. I actually saw a piece on Skip and Shannon Undisputed where he discussed the percentages, and I'm pretty sure it was like, when the onside kick was first established, it was like a 21%, success rate, and after certain rules had changed, it went down to like in the teens, the low teens, and then he looked over at the 4th and 15 conversions all time, and they were 24%. So all time they were, it was going to be way easier to convert a 4th and 15 than a onside kick. And so, while I understand the need for this, why it was brought up, I do understand why it wasn't, approved. But I thought it was very interesting. I think, I like when, the NFL is trying to do things to sort of, spice up the game. And this would have been, teams would have had 2 opportunities a game. So instead of doing their kickoff, they would have had an offensive down from their 25-yard line. And I think, a lot of teams, this could have really shaken up the game. And just, side note here, I know it's not that relevant, but if you're a guy who plays Madden or girl who plays Madden, definitely would have been cool to see in game. Definitely very, very interesting strategies would have been built around this in video game and in real life. I think we would have seen some insane highlights. Teams go score on the first score, they try the 4th and 15, get it again, go up 14-0. And while that is awesome, that could possibly be pretty problematic, because the problem is with a 4th and 15 down, there's penalties. There's, offsides. Oh, now it's 4th and 10, or you get a free down, 4th and 10. Defensive holding, PI. It's automatic first down, so that would be my issue with the 4th and 15, because there's so many more ways to convert a 4th and 15 just by getting the 15 yards. And with the onside kick, you kick it, you got to go get that ball after it crosses 10 yards, right? So it's tough, but I like the the sort of push to sort of shake things up, and sort of get rid of the old things that just aren't working. But it's a shame it didn't go through. I think only problem is, though, it would have also another problem. Sorry, not only problem. It really would have favored pass-heavy teams. Run-heavy teams would have had a harder time converting these 4th and 15s, and so the league is already pass-happy. It seemed like something that was just too sort of, it's very what is this term? Like, it sort of had a bunch of recency bias. You know what I mean? It's just sort of a sign of the times. Like, we're in a pass-happy league, and people can convert this stuff because everyone's passing the ball, so let's make this a rule based on that. But it sort of screws over teams that are, run-heavy, and so it just sort of seems to be favoring sort of fan entertainment rather than actual competitive football. So it is what it is. They tabled the rule. I would hope to see this come up again, because an interesting fact. So I'm reading here. The new kickoff rules have undoubtedly impacted the ability to overcome late deficits. Teams have attempted an expected onside kick in 104 games over the past 2 seasons, and those teams lost all 104 games according to NFL data. So an onside kick literally has not swung a game in the other direction in the past 2 seasons, and so I understand why they want to do this. I wish they would have at least tested it. I think, testing in the preseason, something like that would have been cool to see, but it is what it is. We move on. Okay, I want to get into now the Joe Flacco situation in regards to Cam Newton. Recently, as you all know, Joe Flacco signed a deal with the Jets to be their backup quarterback, and, the initial reaction was, oh my goodness, they're doing Cam Newton so dirty. Why is he still not on a team? And understandably so. However, after sort of, just sitting it there, letting it simmer, it's more and more obvious why Cam Newton is now on a team. And it's because he's so good. And I understand how that sounds sort of ridiculous, right? A team wants the best possible players that they can have. And, of course, Cam Newton would be signed for a cheap deal. But think about this, teams right now are not looking for starting quarterbacks. Teams right now are looking for, solid backup guys who are going to be good for the locker room. And I think right now teams are viewing Cam Newton as too much of a threat to their starting quarterbacks to bring him in. And that's why he hasn't gotten a deal yet. Almost every team in the NFL right now has a guy that they believe in at the quarterback position. Now, if you bring Cam Newton in, right, you're opening the door for, you're opening Pandora's box. Once your quarterback has a bad game, hey, coach, he's not looking too good. What are the thoughts on bringing Cam Newton in? Is Cam Newton expected to come in and see any play time? Is Cam Newton this, Cam Newton that, Cam? So when if a team signs Cam Newton, they are effectively, opening the door for all of that. And I am not sure teams want to deal with that right now when they have a guy that they believe in, right? Also, I know, as a competitor, you should always be open to competition, let it fuel you. Bringing a guy like Cam Newton in, a former MVP, could get into the head of your starting quarterback. I mean, not if it's a guy like Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers, these guys, but say you got a guy like Sam Darnold, Tyrod Taylor, guys who haven't had, a lot of success in the NFL, whereas Cam Newton's, been to a Super Bowl and he's a former MVP. They might be intimidated by that kind of guy in the backup role and always have that on their, breathing down their necks. Like, if I have a bad game, my goodness, I'm going to get benched for Cam Newton. So it's understandable why Cam Newton is still, jobless. And I think it actually has, more to do with how good he is than we think. I don't think that teams think he's a bum. I think teams are just very aware of what will happen if and when they do sign him. And that's why it makes more sense that when a team gets their quarterback injured and they have no other options, they will call upon Cam Newton to start rather than their backup. I really don't see Cam Newton not having a job the entire 2020-2021 season, but it's becoming a little bit more understandable as to why, just think about it. I think it's an interesting perspective. That's my take on it right now. If there's any other reason that Cam Newton's not signed, that makes absolutely no sense. And understand, too, as much as Cam is a good guy and he's done good things, he is a guy with a big ego, right? And he demands a lot of camera attention, and, he's just one of those guys who's a superstar, a great smile, crazy with the fashion. And so it's just, you're not just getting the quarterback Cam Newton, and then never mind. I mean, and also, guys, you gotta remember he's been injured, right? So on top of that, he's also been injured. On top of his potential to cause that sort of stir, potential to sort of take the spot of your starter that you believe in. He's also been very injury prone and has fallen off severely. So you guys got to add all of that together. You know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, the first problem is they're taking a risk on a guy who's had serious health concerns. So remember that. At the end of the day, guys, it does stink that he's not on the team yet. I would like to see him on a team, especially for fantasy football's sake. I think he's got potential. He's going to bounce back pretty well, but teams are, I guess they're just not into taking that sort of risk right now. I hope he finds a job soon. But with that, guys, we'll go into our second break. And when we get back, more, in other news, more stuff around the league. And I want to talk about a recent article posted where John Harbaugh is talking about Lamar Jackson. So stay tuned, guys. We'll be right back after this short break.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Alrighty, guys, welcome back to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. We just got done talking about Cam Newton's situation. Joe Flacco getting signed before him. Clearly, Joe Flacco is not a better quarterback than Cam Newton right now, but it's an interesting situation. Okay, I want to start this segment off talking about a recent article that I saw on NFL.com where John Harbaugh is talking about Lamar Jackson and their plans for next season. Now, it's interesting because, the title of the article, Harbaugh, next step for Lamar Jackson is improving the deep ball. And I don't know, I know this podcast host who was talking about that recently, in a couple shows. Oh yeah, that was me. And I was saying, I've been saying that I think the Ravens are going to be running less with Lamar Jackson. And that's why they drafted J.K. Dobbins. They're not going to go into 2020 with the same approach. yes, they made history with that run game, but they know that they need to be able to throw the ball. That's just the way it is right now. Harbaugh says those corners are going to be one-on-one and those safeties are going to be one-on-one against receivers, especially on some downfield throws, and we got to make them pay for it. We absolutely have to make them pay. The ability to make them pay for tilting their defense towards stopping our run game with a really, really efficient passing game, I do believe that's the next step of this offense. I really do believe Lamar is going to take the next step. So, like I've been saying this whole time, while Lamar Jackson is, liable to run, liable to go score a touchdown with his legs, expect that to seriously turn down next season. They need to throw the ball more. They saw what happens when you have a guy running all season and then you throw him into a situation where he has to throw the ball. He throws the ball 50-plus times and has horrible completion percentage, and you lose the game. They're going to, I think they're going to remain run heavy. I don't say, and Harbaugh says here himself, I wouldn't say we're going to scrap the run game, and I wouldn't say we're going to become a more conventional offense. That's the last thing we want to do. We didn't change the offense to scrap the idea that we want to cause people problems. We just wanted to get better at taking advantage of weaknesses. Makes sense, right? Because they were one-dimensional. That was it. The Ravens were simply one-dimensional. You knew that they were going to come out in the pistol formation. Lamar was going to take it or he was going to give it to Mark Ingram. It didn't matter. Somebody was running the ball. And when they passed the ball, Mark Andrews was getting the ball. You know what I mean? And Marquise Brown, wasn't healthy enough to sort of take the top off the defenses and open that up. And it was just the Titans took advantage of that. They took advantage of, Lamar's inability to throw the deep ball, as much as a guy like Russell Wilson or Patrick Mahomes. And they took it and ran with it. And they dismantled the Baltimore Ravens. So, if we take a look at the numbers, Lamar Jackson, he ranked 27th in completions of at least 15 air yards, 43.8%. That's just pretty bad. If you ask me, under 50%. In the playoff loss to the Titans, he completed just 35.3%. That's pretty bad. That's on deep throws. That's just not okay. And, it was a problem all along, but everybody was blinded by, the juking and the spinning and the running and all that stuff when they should have been paying more attention to, the inability to throw the ball. Because I said it all year, watching him, it was great. It was cool, something new to the league. But I said if they get behind, they're going to lose games, and they're going to lose important games. And they did against Kansas City, my own team. I said if we get ahead, Patrick Mahomes starts lighting it up, they will not win. And that's what happened. Yes, the defense started to slip up a bit, but the defense at that point wasn't coming together fully. It didn't come together, and it's the Chiefs' defense, right? But they lost the game, and that's what matters. Doesn't matter if it's by 1, 2, 3, 27, 40. They lost the game, right? The L shows up the same on the stat sheet. So if Lamar Jackson can take that next step with the deep ball, my oh my, he's going to be probably the scariest weapon in the NFL. And I understand, Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback by a mile in the NFL right now. He's amazingly clutch. Whatever you believe about that Super Bowl, he got it done, made the throws that he needed to make when he needed to make them, and he was amazing. Lamar Jackson doesn't have that clutch in him as of right now. I haven't seen Lamar. Well, he hasn't had too much, right? Because they're never really down. They were constantly with their foot on the gas. But in the games that where other teams came out to a lead, he ended up losing those games. So we do have to pay attention to that. If he gets that sort of factor in him, that X factor where he can just take, a 12-play drive up the field, run a bunch of time off the clock and score to win the game, oh yeah. Going to be a big, big problem for a lot of teams in the league. So expect him to throw the ball a lot more, guys. I would say raises the value of his receivers, but I don't want to commit to that just yet. Of course, he's training to do that. It's not saying, we can't just say, oh, Lamar's trained to do it, so he's going to get it done. We've talked about, if you're a fan of basketball, I'm a Sixers fan. I'm not a huge follower of basketball, but Ben Simmons was supposed to be working on his shot and his jumper and his three-pointer in the offseason. And, there were videos coming out. It looked great. But when it came down to it in game time, we all know he's still not shooting the ball. So tamper your expectations a bit. If Lamar starts throwing the ball like this, Marquise Brown will become a top threat at a wide receiver just because he's got the burners. And I think teams so scared of the run with play action, he'll be wide open on tons of deep balls. So keep an eye on this situation. I think it's very, very interesting. But going to limit Lamar Jackson's fantasy points if he's throwing more instead of running. So very, very interesting stuff. I thought it was pretty cool. Now, I want to talk about another team in the AFC North, the Cleveland Browns. And I kind of want to talk about them a lot today. Now, the Cleveland Browns, it came out recently. They are having a sweepstakes for a fan to call plays. And I think it's pretty interesting. Now, I think it's the most Cleveland Brown thing to do. I think it's actually pretty hilarious because, of course, the Cleveland Browns are going to let a fan script 15 plays. But so the sweepstake is they're going to let a fan select 15 plays, the first 15 plays of the games in one of the Browns' preseason games, and that's part of the All-In Challenge to help raise money, to help those struggling during the coronavirus pandemic. Very, very cool. Love that. Definitely all in, no pun intended, but I'm all in for that. Huge support, for the coronavirus pandemic. Anything that has to do with support for the coronavirus pandemic, I'm about it. So, of course, if it's legal and okay and all that stuff. But I just thought this was really funny because it's the Cleveland Browns. But if that fan is anything like anyone who plays Madden, their first 15 plays are going to be inside zone runs, maybe an outside stretch and 4 verticals. Maybe a random play action pass on 3rd and long where everyone knows you're not running the ball too. So be ready for that. But I really, really like this. I'm pretty sure, I've read a while ago there was a football league where, the fans completely picked the plays for the team. It was like an arena football team, I believe it was. I think it's a really cool idea. I don't think it's practical for professional sports though. But honestly, it's definitely better than Freddie Kitchens running a draw play on a 3rd and long, or was it a 4th and long? So some fans definitely do have more competence than some head coaches we've seen, a.k.a. not running it on the goal line, Pete Carroll, things like that. So I think it's going to be very, very interesting. I'd love to see the plays that they script. They did say, he doesn't just get to pick, he or she doesn't just get to pick all the plays, but they're of course going to take them into consideration. But I hope it ends up in a touchdown drive. That'd be really, really cool. I love that they're doing this. It's getting the fans more involved with the team and the game. I don't think we've ever seen anything like this. I really, really like it. It's a cool idea. And of course, it's supporting a great cause. So very, very cool. Can't wait to see it. Just wanted to give my thoughts on that because, man, the Cleveland Browns are such a joke. Let's see if the fan can coach the offense better than Freddie Kitchens did, right? So I can't wait to see that. Now, with that, guys, we're going to take a short break. And when we get back, I want to talk about the Browns again because I think a lot of people are sleeping on them. We probably shouldn't. So when we get back, more Cleveland Browns talk.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Alrighty, guys, welcome back to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. just got done talking about the Ravens, a little bit about the Browns, a little sweepstakes going on. And now, excuse me, I want to talk about the Browns, sort of being slept on. More importantly, Baker Mayfield. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of Baker Mayfield just because I like when a guy talks a lot and then he gets stomped. I like when guys are cocky, but then they get beat. So when I saw Baker Mayfield struggling last season, I was all for it. I'm a hater, guys. I think I'm just a hater by nature. Excuse me. I don't hate on everyone, though, but, just because they're not on my team. But Baker Mayfield came into the league, thought he was some big shot, thought he was Superman, and he quickly got punched in the mouth, right? He got this crazy, loaded, talented roster. We saw him all season constantly rolling to his left, making horrible throws. Not at all what he was last season. Now, that's no reason to believe he'll do it again, though. I think with this new coach, Kevin Stefanski coming in, yes, he came from a run-heavy offense, but I think, if the Browns become a more run-focused team, they've upgraded the offensive line, this is really going to help Baker Mayfield flourish. I think, taking all the pressure off of him, letting Nick Chubb run the rock, letting Kareem Hunt run the rock, and, opening up the field for play-action passes, it's really going to help Baker Mayfield build his confidence, really catch rhythm in games, and I think he's going to be a suitable fantasy football quarterback. No, I don't think, this automatically makes him, top 10, but I think, I think he's being slept on. I think he's a guy you can stash. We have to remember, guys, this is a team that severely underperformed. There were people calling for this team to go to the Super Bowl. So take your chance on Baker Mayfield if you can in the later rounds of the drafts. I don't think a lot of people are going to be drafting him. One, he's on the Cleveland Browns. Two, he just had a horrible season. So, just stash him. I think he's really worth the stash because if this team comes together, they're going to light it up on offense, So, definitely keep Baker Mayfield in your line of sight. I think he's definitely going to be worth it. Along with another quarterback here that I want to talk about, Gardner Minshew. Now, Minshew Mania, everybody remembers that whole thing, the mustaches, the jorts, all that. Besides that, Minshew is a solid quarterback. I'm pretty sure off the top of my head, he posted the highest passer rating for a rookie. Was it ever? No, it wasn't. Was it? Something. Oh, you know what? Just disregard that. Sorry, that's off the top of my head. But he was very, very efficient in his first season with the Jacksonville Jaguars. He went 6-6, yes, as a starter, but you have to remember his team is not that amazing. He set franchise records for a rookie in yards and touchdowns. I think he's got magic to him, sort of like Mahomes has magic to him. Gardner Minshew has the ability and athleticism to extend plays, make plays outside of the pocket, and next year, as a full-time starter, I think he's going to put up some numbers. I think he's going to be very, very comfortable with that team. He's a starter for sure. Nick Foles is gone. It's his team, his time to lead, and I think he takes a big step forward. Gardner Minshew, and I know there's a lot of you guys out there had Gardner Minshew on your teams or starting for you at some point last season, so, don't just give up on him. I think he's going to be a very interesting pickup in fantasy drafts. Of course, you don't want to pick him to be your number one, if there's other better quarterbacks on the board. But I like Gardner Minshew next season, guys. DJ Chark was a very, very solid option. He found him whenever he needed to. And, they have a pretty, of course, it's not the greatest receiving core, but I think they're pretty solid. And of course, they still have Leonard Fournette. He didn't leave the team, and that's going to help a lot too, right? When you have that sort of running threat, it helps a quarterback be able to pass the ball because, the defenses are scared of that running back. Hit a play action pass, deep over the top, boom, touchdown. Easy like 8 points for a quarterback and, 10 points for a wide receiver. So, or 11, I should say, sorry. So, very, very interesting situations with these two because I feel like, and it sucks because, like I said, everything in football, nothing happens in a vacuum, right? And so when great players are on crappy teams, they get overlooked and they get slept on. So, you got to take advantage of that. Baker Mayfield is a good player who, that whole team is full of good players who had horrible leadership, right? And, Gardner Minshew's on a team with okay players, but he makes it work, and he's putting up some good numbers. They also don't have the best leadership, right? The Jaguars franchise is kind of a mess. So, don't sleep on them just because of that. Focus on what they do on the field, and I think they'll reward you pretty handsomely. All right. I want to move on and talk about another player. Running back, though. Well, running backs, plural. Carlos Hyde and Chris Carson. Now, Carlos Hyde recently signed a deal with the Seattle Seahawks, and I don't like this for fantasy football, guys. I got to be honest here. Carlos Hyde, last season, 4.4 yards a carry, 1,070 yards, 6 TDs. So I don't know, man. I just don't like them bringing in, Carlos Hyde by no means is a bum, and I don't understand, he didn't have the best, 2018 season. It was actually pretty terrible. And his last season with San Fran wasn't, the greatest either, but he had one of his better seasons in a while with the Houston Texans. It was his highest career total, I think, for yards in the season. And 6 touchdowns, while not, the greatest amount, it's okay. It's solid. He comes on this team with Chris Carson, Rashad Penny. Teams, a team with running backs who are just severely injured and depleted. And this is going to take value off of Chris Carson for sure. I think this is going to be a running back, sort of a 1-2 punch kind of deal. And while I like Chris Carson, he does have a fumbling issue. Carlos Hyde definitely has the potential to sort of take that starting role. He was very productive in Houston last season. I think now this is definitely going to devalue Chris Carson and even himself. And also Carlos Hyde, remember, he wasn't huge in the pass game, so he doesn't have that sort of pass game potential. And now we just have to deal with him taking carries and touchdowns away from Chris Carson. So that's unfortunate. One thing I do want to talk about, though, in regards to the Seahawks, Devontae Freeman declined an offer from them, and I really don't understand that. I mean, who is Devontae Freeman to be rejecting anything right now? And listen, I understand, guys have, they value themselves, and, when they want, a certain amount of money, they're going to do anything they can to chase that bag. And I get it, I respect it, you want your money, but I'm sorry, Devontae Freeman hasn't done much since the Falcons went on that Super Bowl run. Since then, he's been average and hurt. And so, for him to sort of reject an offer from a team is sort of a slap in the face at that team, first of all. And, from the Seattle Seahawks, I think that was a team he could have been productive on. I understand, yes, he's still sort of young. I think he's 28 right now. You gotta be real. You've been hurt. You've been ineffective. The team's offering you a deal. You're still a free agent right now as we speak. And this was about a week or two ago when he rejected this offer. And so they just moved on to the next and got it. But I think that also says something about the Seattle Seahawks, right? They're looking for a solid running back to put in some work. So this is not just a guy who's, going to be a backup to Chris Carson, because Devontae Freeman, while yes, he's hurt and ineffective, he did, he had sort of that David Johnson kind of thing where he has that potential in him. He just has to get back to it after dealing with the health concerns, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't think he should have rejected this contract. I think, okay, yes, $4 million, but you can prove yourself, sign a $4 million one-year deal, and then prove yourself and get, a bigger contract. Now, though, reportedly the Buccaneers have interest in Devontae Freeman. I would hate to see that, man, because if he goes to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and sort of rejuvenates himself and goes back to proper form, that's going to be a very, very scary team as well. But I think he should have taken the deal with the Seahawks. Anyways, the point of this is to say, Seahawks running back room, not going to be one you're very interested in. Even though they run the ball a ton, they're going to be sharing a lot of carries, so it's going to be hard to predict who's going to score the most points, as of right now at least. But with that, guys, we're going to take a short break, and when we get back, more topics that I haven't got to talk about. I still haven't talked about the George Floyd situation, which I'm definitely going to get into. I definitely want to share my thoughts on that. So, of course, stick around for that, because I think, everyone should be having this conversation and listening. So stay tuned, guys. We'll be right back after this short break.
Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football, from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. We just got done talking about some specific players. When I think of them, Baker Mayfield is going to bounce back, guys. Gardner Minshew, don't sleep on him. And Seahawks running backs room is just a little bit too crowded for me right now. Now, I want to move on to something more serious. I've already, alluded to it before. I let you guys know the George Floyd situation. And the subsequent reaction by the people of the United States. Now, if you don't know what happened to George Floyd, or you have no clue what I'm talking about, please get out from under your rock. Look it up. I don't want to, sort of talk about what happened. It was, it's very tragic and graphic. But in its simplest form, George Floyd was an innocent man who was killed by police in Minneapolis. There's not much more to say about that. He was unarmed, and now masses in the U.S. around the country have gone out and protest, have started rioting, and yeah. The point why I want to bring this up is because we've seen a lot of celebrities step up and say something. We've seen a lot of players step up and say something, and I really appreciate those. But to sort of echo the words of Shannon Sharp, we need the Tom Brady's, the Aaron Rodgers, the J.J. Watts, things of that nature, the non-black athletes to come out and show their support. Of course, we're assuming that they support because we hope, as human beings, being humane, you support this cause. And I think, showing solidarity, because unfortunately at the end of the day, the masses do have power, and the masses do have a voice. But when you have, the government's looking down on these masses, they don't have as big of a voice as celebrities, as athletes. A million of us together might equal one, super famous athlete or someone important in the government, and so we need these leaders, these pioneers on social media, in sports, movies, acting, film, everyone who possibly can, who supports this cause, to speak up and say something, no matter the risks to your, financial partners or your projects, things like that. Seeing, it's crazy seeing on ESPN posting Jaylen Brown driving some odd hours to go down to Atlanta and literally go in the streets and protest with these people. Malcolm Brogdon sitting there, watching him speak on how his grandfather walked with Martin Luther King, or was protesting during that time. It's amazing to see. And I do want to give my opinions. I understand the sort of, concern or backlash when you see people rioting. When you see people burning buildings down, when you see people burning cars down, and you say, well, why do you have to do that? That will change nothing. This does nothing but hurt your community. If you are in that boat, just please understand Because while, yes, I don't know if I would go out there and burn things down. We have to understand the frustrations, the anger, the disrespect that, people of color, minorities feel. I myself am a minority, right? So I can understand, where this anger is coming from. I'm not African American. My father was born in Colombia. My mother was born in Puerto Rico. I'm Hispanic. But as a minority, I do understand what it feels like to feel different, to feel like you aren't being treated the same because you are not white. And so for how many years, have people tried to peacefully protest, try and stand up against this, to try and change, and nothing has changed. Never mind the fact, the Ahmaud Arbery situation that just happened. Those two men who basically murdered a man in broad daylight got such little punishment. And the police officers who did this to an innocent man also, an unarmed man who wasn't a threat to kill any of these officers, they need to see justice. And so I just wanted to talk about this because it's something it's been a terrible 2020. Let's just put it that way. And this going on right now, I think it's a very important time in history because we are seeing, people all over the country standing together, uniting in a way that I haven't seen before. And I understand we've been uniting because of COVID. We've come together to support each other and to stay at home. But this right here is something special, honestly. No matter what you think about it, so what's going on outside right now is something special, and it's a very, very important moment in history, in the history of this country. And I think, in future years, our children and future generations are going to be learning about what's happening right now and the support that the whole country is having for George Floyd and the injustices that have, been thrown upon people of color in this country. I think the unity right now is something that's very beautiful. And I understand, yes, the looting, the burning cars down, the burning buildings down is not beautiful. I understand that is messy, that is bad, it is scary. But underneath that all, we have to understand that people are uniting to stand up for what's right. And if that's what it takes to make, governments listen, the people in power to listen, then so be it, right? Of course, I don't want this to completely get out of hand, and, our own president has made his own very harsh and divisive statements on it. I won't repeat them here, but I don't want things to get super violent between, of course, police and the people. But I do respect what is going on out there, and I want to make it clear that I support what's going on out there. And I know this is not a platform. I know we don't get political here, but I do have some sort of voice to sort of voice my opinion here, and so I want to do that because I feel that I'm responsible to do so because I have the ability to do so, right? So I completely support race equality, and I just want everyone to know that what is going on right now, while scary, while tense, it is very important for the culture of this country. And I'm glad that we have athletes supporting the cause, literally going out into the streets. I mean, I couldn't be, more proud of these people. These are super rich athletes. They live comfortable lives. They're safe. These are, they don't have to go out in the streets. They don't have to protest, so to see that happening, to lead that sort of comfortable life. And let's not forget, guys, coronavirus is still a thing. They're also risking catching coronavirus. Of course, a lot of people are wearing masks out there, but doing more than just posting on Twitter, and by all means, post. That there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying, if you're posting, that's not enough, because I wouldn't want to disqualify, the fact that you're putting yourself, your opinions out there to be, devoured by others. But, I just love it. I just love all the support. Hopefully more athletes come out, more white athletes come out, but I just do want you guys to understand that this is what Colin Kaepernick was kneeling for. This is why Colin Kaepernick has been blackballed from the league, because for this right here, police brutality, inequality, and the murder of innocent minorities and people at the hands of police officers. And so, you understand why, and I didn't get to share my opinions on this, but when, it's hard when you see the NFL post statements about this, Yet they blackballed Colin Kaepernick, and even recently on their website, they listed him as a retired player. No matter what you feel about the Colin Kaepernick situation, if you're against it or for it, we all know that that man did not retire from the NFL. They soon after changed it to unrestricted free agent after his wife had posted on Twitter and exposed them, and now, it sort of seems, they've been getting demolished on social media, for posting things in their support of George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery, and it just feels very contradictory. A lot of people in the comments are just saying, well, who are you guys to say you support this, yet you blackballed Colin Kaepernick for supporting the same thing? And so it's disappointing because, this is a sport that I love, and I wish we could do better. I wish the NFL could do better and be more, about the people and for the people, and they haven't done a good enough of a job at doing that. Okay, you posted about something. I know that that's easy to do. To hire someone, social media manager, to draft up a message, to post it, for Roger Goodell to write a message and to post it. But with something as huge as the NFL, they need to take action. They need to take action. They should have never blackballed Colin Kaepernick. It's obvious that they blackballed him. And, of course, they can't make that right, but action needs to be taken. Like I said, guys, this is a very important time in history. I'm sorry to get all serious on you guys, but it's conversation that needs to happen. Avoiding the conversation does nothing, even though avoiding the conversation because it's uncomfortable is wrong. We have to face the uncomfortableness of these situations, talk about them, and hopefully we can make a change. So, excuse me. Sorry if that was, actually, I'm not going to apologize if that was, if you didn't like this conversation here. It's something that has to happen. But, no more being a downer. We're going to go into our break, and when we get back, guys, we're going to wrap up the show. But I hope you can take something out of this conversation and the things that are going on around you, and hopefully take something positive out of it all. We're seeing history being made. All right, guys, we'll get into our short break, and when we come back, we'll wrap up the show with our last segment.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Welcome back to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. And for today's last segment, guys, I want to talk about on NFL.com. A list was released of the top 10 secondary players in the league, basically the top 10 pass defenders. And I want to go through that. And I also want to talk about some, sort of sleeper defenses I have for the fantasy football season. Now, the top 10 secondary list, the first two DBs on this list are on the same team, which is pretty insane. Stephon Gilmore and J.C. Jackson. Now, the Patriots defense is not going to be a top 5 defense next season. And even though they have two amazing players in their secondary, I think they're going to struggle a lot, guys. I think, with the offense struggling, and with their other teams in their division stepping up and improving drastically, the Patriots are going to have a hard time on defense and special teams in fantasy football next season, and they're going to severely drop from the number 1 spot in their historic numbers that they put up last season. So please temper your expectations on the Patriots. Don't draft them too high. You're going to pay for it. I guarantee it. Number 3 on this list was safety for the Denver Broncos, Justin Simmons. Number 4 on the list, Tre'Davious White. And my goodness, guys, the AFC is just loaded with talent on defense. Let me just say that. They dominate this list. Eddie Jackson was number 5. Harrison Smith, number 6. Denzel Ward, number 7. Bradley McDougald, number 8. And number 9, a guy I know, Tyrann Mathieu, number 10. Darius Leonard. Okay. Well, first of all, I just want to get the one sleeper out of the way. The Kansas City Chiefs are a sleeper defense that you need to pay attention to. I think the Kansas City Chiefs have potential to be a top 10 fantasy football defense next season. Tyrann Mathieu was insane last season, and, Frank Clark off the edge, Chris Jones, hopefully he stays healthy next season. With the addition of Willie Gay at the linebacker position, guys, I think he's going to be very, very important for this defense. He was a freak. He tested very, very well at the combine. He was only behind Isaiah Simmons in a lot of categories. And yes, he had off-field concerns, but if we can get that in order, I think he has a chance to make a huge, huge difference for this defense. As I spoke about before, the Chiefs, while, they have this stigma for being a terrible defense, the pass defense was one of the best in the league. The run defense, yes, that struggled a lot, but I think we'll get that together next season. And I think, with, adding Clyde Edwards-Helaire into the mix with more of a run game, not scoring as fast, the defense will be on the field less, and we'll be able to make more plays and be very, very solid. So, and keep in mind too, guys, we play the Denver Broncos twice a year. We play the Raiders twice a year. We play the Chargers twice a year. And while, yes, I think, those teams are on the up and up, we have to, remember their quarterbacks aren't the best. So we'll be able to take advantage of them. Always remember that, guys. A lot of times too in fantasy football, it's not necessarily just the talent that you have on that team, but the matchups. Every time someone was playing with the Miami Dolphins last year, you probably started them on defense, right? And you even started them on offense because they were just a bad team. You started a team who was playing against the Dolphins on offense and defense. So it's one of those situations as well. So pay attention to the Chiefs next season. Now, another defense that I think people are sleeping on, the Steelers. And now, I'm not saying they're not sleeping on them a ton, but I think the Steelers have a chance to be a top 2 defense. And just like they were last season, I'm pretty sure last season they finished at, off the top of my head, number 2 in fantasy football rankings. But if you look at rankings right now, a lot of the times you'll see the 49ers first, the Ravens second, the Patriots, up high, or, and I think we have to pay attention to the Steelers. And, they constantly are generating pressure, getting sacks, and that directly translates to fantasy football points. So pay attention to the Steelers, guys. They have a chance to be a top fantasy football defense again. Remember, they were a top fantasy football defense last season without Ben Roethlisberger and without an efficient offense. So they were on the field much more than usual, much more than they should have been. So pay attention to them. They could surprise a lot of people. Another defense I want to talk about here, and who had a player on this list, the Indianapolis Colts. Darius Leonard is the only linebacker on that list. He was a top 10 pass defender in the secondary. So that's pretty insane. This is a guy who super young. He doesn't get much recognition. I think his rookie season, he probably should have won Defensive Rookie of the Year. I think someone else might have. Oh, no, maybe it was him. Sorry, off the top of my head, I can't remember. I know he had an insane amount of tackles in his rookie season. He's a great player. I think the Indianapolis Colts as a team overall are great. They have the young cornerback Pierre Desir. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. Who's solid. Their team is solid overall. Justin Houston. They just got DeForest Buckner. We have to pay attention to this team, guys. They're definitely a solid unit overall. And I just think they suffer from being, a small market team, a team that's rooted in tradition and those boring uniforms. But I think they're a team that a lot of people are sleeping on now. Another team that I think people are too hype on right now, the San Francisco 49ers. Yeah, I know. I said it, guys. I'm going to be moving them out of my top 3, possibly even my top 5, just because, well, one, they lost a huge piece of their defense in DeForest Buckner. That's going to, dramatically affect that defensive line, which again has an effect on the secondary. Richard Sherman is only getting older. We have to remember this. With age comes a decline in skill, and I don't know how much longer Richard Sherman can keep up. Now, they have to face the Cardinals twice a year, with DeAndre Hopkins, Kyler Murray, they have to face Russell Wilson twice a year. They have to face the Rams twice a year, who I expect will be better on offense next season. So I really don't have faith in these San Francisco 49ers to put up, the sort of numbers that they were putting up last season. Like I've mentioned last season a lot, and I understand they have Nick Bosa, who's amazing. He's going to be great. Dee Ford, though, can't stay healthy. You have great linebackers, Fred Warner, but, and they also have a solid safety. I think Jimmy Ward. I was blanking on his name. Sorry, but guys, with their matchups, with their sort of, I think the last season was sort of fluky. I just don't have faith in them to perform as high as people are expecting them to. I think they'll be solid, but I think we need to temper our expectations on the 49ers a bit and give more attention to teams like the Steelers, the Ravens, who have done a great job restocking the defense. The Ravens, man, are just going to be a powerhouse on both sides of the ball, and teams like the Chiefs that usually will have a bad reputation but have stepped it up and have made improvements on the defensive side of the ball. So pay attention to those teams, guys. Of course, I'll have more teams I think you guys should be paying attention to, but the Colts, the Chiefs, I think teams are sleeping on them. I think people are sleeping on them way too much. I think they'll surprise a lot of people next season. I think the 49ers and the Patriots are going to be dipping a lot in value. But with that, guys, I want to say thank you for listening to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Guys, I want to ask that you follow us Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, the Twitter, at GSMC_F Football. And, leave a comment down below. Let us know what you like. Let us know what you hate. Of course, keep it constructive. Don't want any disrespectful comments. But stay safe, guys. Stay healthy. Remember, coronavirus is still a thing. I understand that, with all the rioting going on and other tragedies and other crazy things going on, people might forget. But keep yourself safe from the coronavirus. If you are out protesting, keep yourself safe, guys. Be responsible. And, just spread positive energy, guys. And try to make a change in any way you can. So with that, guys, I want to say good night, and we'll see you next time.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.